The salvage skiff screamed through the atmosphere of Viridian 7, trailing fire and smoke. Cale gripped the controls with white knuckles, cursing the pirates who'd shot him down over this forbidden moon. The crash was brutal metal shrieking, bones jarring, but he survived. When the dust settled, he found himself in a canyon of obsidian towers, each one carved with warnings in a dozen dead languages. His distress beacon was fried. No rescue coming. Just him and the ruins. That's when he heard it, a sound like thunder, but rhythmic. Breathing. Cale followed the sound through a collapsed archway, into a vast chamber lit by bioluminescent fungi. And there she was, a figure so massive he thought at first she was a statue. 20 feet tall, chained at the wrists and ankles with restraints that hummed with ancient energy. Her skin was the color of sunset, vibrant orange that seemed to glow in the dim light, and her hair fell in cascading waves of pure blonde over shoulders broader than he was tall. She shifted, and the chains rattled. Her eyes silver with flecks of gold locked onto him. Please, ... Her voice was enormous yet fragile, echoing through the chamber with desperate softness. Please. Save me. Cale should have run. Every species in the sector had stories about her kind, the Valtherians, giants who could tear ships apart with their bare hands, warriors who'd once ruled entire star systems before their civilization fell, but her eyes, they weren't fierce. They were terrified. How long have you been here? He asked, stepping closer despite every survival instinct screaming at him to flee. 347 cycles. Her voice cracked. I've counted every sunrise through that crack. She gestured with her chin toward a fissure in the ceiling. You're the first who hasn't run. He noticed then the scars on her wrists where the chains had cut deep, the way she trembled despite her size, the careful way she held herself as if afraid her own strength might frighten him away. My name is Cale, he said, moving toward the control pedestal near her chains. Let's get you out of here. For the first time in centuries, she smiled. The control pedestal was a nightmare of incompatible technology. 3 different civilizations' work layered atop each other, each trying to keep the Valtherian prisoner. Cale worked for hours, his salvager's intuition guiding him through alien circuits while she watched with those luminous silver eyes. What's your name? He asked, bypassing another security protocol. Lysa? The word rolled off her tongue like music. Though the ones who chained me here called me Weapon 7. That's not a name. That's an insult. She laughed, a sound that resonated through his chest like distant bells. You're a curious little thing, aren't you? Not afraid of me at all. Should I be? He glanced up at her, wiping sweat from his brow. Everyone else was. Her expression darkened. My people were conquerors once. When the coalition defeated us, they imprisoned the survivors. I was ... different. Too gentle for war. So they made me their failed project and left me to rot. Cale's fingers stilled on the controls. Gentle? Watch. Slowly, deliberately, she extended one massive hand toward him, a hand that could crush him like an insect. He didn't flinch. Her fingertip, easily the size of his fist, touched his shoulder with impossible delicacy. It was like being brushed by silk, softer than anything he'd ever felt. I can feel the tremor of your heartbeat, she whispered. I could count each thread in your jacket. We were bred for destruction, but I can feel everything. Every fragile, beautiful thing. His breath caught as her finger traced along his arm, feather-light, reverent, as if he were made of glass. The others could never understand, Lysa continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Strength without restraint is just violence. But to be this strong and still be gentle, that takes something they didn't value. Compassion. A spark jumped from the pedestal, the final lock disengaging. The chains fell away with a thunderous crash, and Lysa gasped, collapsing forward. Kale rushed to her and she caught herself on her hands. Bringing her face level with his dot this close, he could see the fine details, the way her orange skin had subtle gradients like a living sunset, how her blonde hair caught the fungal light like spun gold, the silver tears gathering in her eyes. "You freed me," she breathed, and her exhale washed over him like a warm wind. "Why?" "Because everyone deserves freedom," Kale said simply. "Even giants." The facility had other ideas about freedom. The moment the chains fully disengaged, ancient defense systems roared to life. Red warning lights bathed the chamber as automated turrets descended from hidden panels. Energy weapons charged with a distinctive whine that made Kale's hair stand on end. "Run!" Lysa shouted, but Kale stood frozen. There was nowhere to go. The exit was 100 yards away, and the turrets were already tracking them. What happened next redefined his understanding of grace. Lysa moved with fluid speed that defied her size, her body curving around him like a living shield. Energy bolts struck her back with sizzling impacts, and she grunted in pain but didn't move. One arm braced against the ground, the other curved protectively over his head. She formed a cocoon of flesh and bone between him and destruction. "Lysa, I've survived worse." Her voice was strained but determined. "The ceiling, the structural supports are glowing. Can you reach them from my shoulder?" Understanding flooded through him. "You want me to climb you?" "Unless you have a better idea before we're both vaporized." Kale grabbed a handful of her hair, softer than rope, strong as cable, and pulled himself up onto her shoulder. From this height, he could see the power conduits feeding the turrets, pulsing with toxic green energy behind corroded panels. The facility groaned. Chunks of ceiling began to fall, and Lysa shifted with each impact, keeping him safe while pieces of debris struck her exposed skin. He worked frantically, rerouting power, overloading circuits, and then the turrets went dark. But the ceiling didn't stop falling. "Go!" Kale shouted, and Lysa moved. Despite her injuries, despite carrying him, she sprinted toward the exit with ground-eating strides. Behind them, the chamber collapsed in a cascade of stone and ancient metal. They burst through the archway just as the entrance sealed itself in rubble. Outside, under Viridian 7's purple sky, Lysa finally fell to her knees. Kale slid down her arm, frantically checking her injuries. Burns covered her back, and blood copper-colored and luminescent seeped from a dozen wounds. "Why did you do that?" His hands trembled as he tried to assess the damage. "You barely know me." She turned her head, and despite the pain, she smiled. "You were the first person in 3 centuries who looked at me and saw someone worth saving. Did you think I would let you die? You're hurt because of me. I'm free because of you." Her massive hand cupped his cheek with that impossible gentleness. "Do you know what that's worth?" "Everything." Her touch said everything. They made camp in the shelter of a collapsed tower, far enough from the ruins to feel safe. Kale did what he could for Lysa's wounds with his limited medical supplies. The burns would heal. She insisted. Her people were resilient, but she allowed him to tend to her anyway, seeming to treasure the attention more than any medicine. As darkness fell, Viridian 7's purple sky blazed with constellations he didn't recognize. Lysa sat with her back against stone, and Kale settled beside her, though beside meant he only reached her hip even when she was sitting. "Tell me about out there," she said softly. "The galaxy I've missed." So he told her. About the trade routes and the frontier worlds, about humanity's expansion and the uneasy peace between species. About music and art and all the small beautiful things that made life worth living. She listened with an intensity that made him feel like his words were precious treasures. "And you?" he asked. "What were you like before all this?" Lysa's expression grew distant. "I was an artist. A sculptor. My people think it's shameful. We're bred for war. not creation. But I would spend days shaping stone with nothing but my hands, trying to capture the way light fell through crystal formations, or how wind moved through the grass of our home world. That's why your touch is so controlled, Kale realized. You're not just strong. You're an artist who learned infinite precision. She nodded, and her hand descended slowly until it rested palm up beside him, an invitation. He stepped into her palm, and she lifted him gently until they were eye to eye. This close, her face filled his vision, elegant features, skin like living sunset, those silver eyes that reflected the stars. I dreamed of someone like you, she confessed. During those endless cycles, I would imagine that someone would come who wouldn't see a monster or a weapon. Who would see ... me. I see you, Lisa. Her thumb stroked his back with the same delicacy she'd once used on stone. My people have a tradition. When someone saves your life, you offer them your heart's truth. So here is mine. I felt something the moment you didn't run. Something I'd given up hoping for. What's that? Connection. The word hung between them like a prayer. You're so small, and I'm so large. But when you touch me, when you look at me like I'm not a nightmare, I feel like I finally fit somewhere. Kale placed his hand against her thumb, his fingers barely spanning a fraction of it. I've been alone in the black for years, Lisa. Just me and my ship in the empty. I'd forgotten what it felt like to matter to someone. You matter to me. She brought him closer until his forehead rested against her cheek. Her skin was warm, slightly textured like fine suede. You matter more than freedom, more than healing, more than all the centuries I lost. They stayed like that as purple stars wheeled overhead. Two beings who shouldn't fit finding themselves perfectly matched that morning on Viridian 7, arrived in shades of amber and gold. Kale woke to find Lisa already awake, her face turned toward the sunrise with an expression of pure wonder. 347 cycles, she whispered. And I never got tired of this. He climbed onto her shoulder without asking. It had become natural overnight, and together they watched the light paint the ruins in copper and flame. Her hair, loose and cascading, caught the dawn like liquid gold. My beacon's dead, Kale said eventually. But there's a mining outpost 3 days' journey north. We? She turned her head, and he could see hope warring with fear in her eyes. You want me to come with you? Did you think I'd leave you here? I thought ... She swallowed hard. I thought once you were safe, you'd realize what I am. What people will think when they see you with a Valtherian. The danger. Stop. He pressed his hand against her neck, feeling the giant pulse beneath. I don't care what they think. And danger? Lisa, I crash-landed on a forbidden moon and broke into an ancient prison. My life choices aren't exactly cautious. She laughed that bell-tone sound he was already addicted to and carefully wrapped her fingers around him, holding him against her collarbone. He could feel her heartbeat, massive and steady, the rhythm of a living mountain. I owe you my life, she said, repeating the words from the ruins, but my heart chose you long before you freed me. The moment you asked my name instead of running. The moment you touched me like I was fragile instead of fearsome. I've been yours since then. Kale looked up at her face, at the being who could crush ships but chose to be gentle, who had suffered centuries alone but still had hope enough to trust him. Then I choose you too, he said. All of you. The strength and the softness and everything in between. Lisa lowered him carefully to the ground and then slowly, deliberately, she lowered herself too, resting on her stomach so they could be face to face. Even like this, her head was the size of a cargo crate, but somehow it felt intimate rather than overwhelming. I've never kissed anyone, she admitted, her voice shy. I was always too big, too dangerous. Then we'll figure it out together. He placed both hands on her cheek, and she went perfectly still, letting him guide her. When their lips met, his so small against hers impossibly soft and warm, the universe seemed to hold its breath. It was clumsy and beautiful and perfect in its imperfection. When they parted, Lisa was crying luminescent tears tracking down her orange skin. "I thought I'd die in that chamber," she whispered, "alone and forgotten. But you gave me something better than freedom, Cale. You gave me belonging." "Then stay with me," he said. "We'll find a ship big enough for both of us, and we'll figure out the rest as we go. Together." She smiled, radiant as sunrise, soft as her impossible touch. Together. And under purple skies on a forbidden moon, a salvager and a giantess began their journey toward a future neither had dared to imagine. Different sizes, different worlds, but somehow miraculously perfect for each other. Everything changed after that moment. But some changes, they both discovered, were worth any risk. The end.